This has been one of the most requested artist breakdowns for me to do, and today we're getting it done. My name is Chaco, and I've done a breakdown of Matroda and Max Styler on my channel if you want to check those out, but today we're going over Hills and Danson's track Control, what works in it and why it works, and how we can use those in our tracks. We're going to go over how they use call and response, storytelling with automation, and just honestly a lot of simplicity. If these breakdowns are something you're into, let me know who you want me to check out next, and make sure to subscribe, all that stuff. Let's go. So there were three really big things I noticed when I was recreating these three intro sections of this Hills track Control. And one is that there's two vocals throughout the track, and the use of the background vocal specifically and how it evolves was really important, as well as the placement of certain drums and the swing elements involved, and then just the automation and storytelling of certain elements throughout just the intro as they get introduced. So we're going to listen to just the first 24 bars because I want to save this breakdown and drop for another video because I don't think Hills is going away, and they offer some super interesting production strategies. Let's get into our 24 bars. I just stole their kick drum. So what do we all hear in those 24 bars? Well, thankfully, we do have these markers where if you didn't know, you can go to edit info text, and then this thing pops up in the bottom corner, and you can type in notes, take reference, or like make references. But what I did is just start with what we had, and I listened to the reference of this track here. Don't want to get copyright. And I just wrote down everything I was hearing. So if we look here, we have kick with automation, hat, closed hat, eighth note rhythm, closed hat or shaker, 16th rhythm, a clap layer. We have an offbeat rhythm hat, an offbeat snare, and a background vocal chop. So setting up your standard boots and cats, you have your kick. And yeah, you're getting a little artifacts because I took it from the track. Add in our hi-hats. So something I've told a lot of my students in my one-on-ones is that over the years, I've kind of landed on creating my own hi-hat through samples rather than finding the perfect one sample. So I have this hi-hat here, along with this one. That's what that sounds like together. Then I have this 16th set, or this set of 16th hi-hats where I'm eluding the first one because that's where the kick falls, and I have another closed hi-hat that's doing something else we'll go over. But I want to note the velocities in these 16th hats are doing a little bit of movement. We have 97, 116, 109. The numbers are kind of irrelevant, but it just adds a little slight dynamics to the hi-hats. If it was exaggerated. That's what this velocity is doing at the bottom. And then I have changed the attack from 0 to about 15, and the decay was a lot longer. So I brought that down as well. But what makes this really move is having a swing. So what you need to do is just come into this grooves tab and then find the one you want. I'm using one of the Logic swings. So you come over to this, make sure it's set to 16ths, not the 8th note ones. And then I scroll down all the way to Logic, and then I'm using 63 or 64. Oh, not those ones. So that's what the transients will sound like at 100% when you add this swing. I have 63, and if I go to the groove pool, I have it swung down to 46%. So that's kind of like a dry wet knob, the timing with the groove. And that's something you can either accentuate or bring down. That's really swingy. This is no swing. And this is where we have it. So that combined with these eighth notes, which you'll hear in a lot of Max Styler tracks and all these offbeat bassline tracks that are coming out, is just something that goes like this. And if you notice, there's a little bit of volume change on these as well. I am doing velocity for the first one and then up on the second one at 122. So it's getting louder on the offbeat. So this kind of supports the kick and then brings it up, supports the hi-hat, and then just keeps a little tick, 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 like a metronome going. And a big thing for me over the years was adding top loops, and I learned a lot of the times in tech house, you can add multiple top loops and it sounds fine. As long as you're lining up transients and making sure everything's tight and mixing it properly. But you also find out as you produce longer and longer that simplicity is key. And sometimes you really don't need that if you know where to put things. So these guys have figured out where to put things, and that's why I wanted to break this track down. So if we unsolo everything and we listen to our whole tune, or our whole, like we'll go first 4 bars. You hear this offbeat hi-hat, which is just so important. That I moved over to the left, so it comes out one ear a little more distinctly. And then they have just an offbeat clap, or just like a filler clap on one of the 16th notes that comes in as well. Just like a little upbeat, you know? And so these guys are using call and response just within 4-bar sections. I've talked about this in previous videos. This is how like you distinguish yourself between people, is how often and how like well calculated you could do calls and responses with different elements throughout the track. So we have this snare comes in like this, and it follows up. So just like a mini drum fill. Now with these claps, I have a few layer here. Again, I like to make my claps just like I like to make my hi-hats to find, rather than necessarily finding the perfect sample. And then after all this, I could just justify this into one sample, save it for myself, and I have a new sample of my own that I like to use. So this with the second clap, this is more of a snare, this is more of a clap, and this is a 909 clap. And if you hear, there's 2 distinct differences, or there's a distinct difference between these two. This one is a little bit shorter, if you notice. We can exaggerate it a little more. And that's another small thing I've heard Chris Lake do in a lot of his tracks, and I think it's going to become more and more a thing when you can add subtleties even in your backbeat like this. Because if we listen to the reference track, I'm going to cut out the low end just so we get most of the clap. So if you listen to this clap versus this clap, this one's tighter. So I have it the opposite, where the second one is longer, but the same principle still applies. It's call and response at such a minimal scale, but such a minimal call and response that you don't get mixed up, or it's not too much at any point. And one thing I just want to go back to quickly is all these off swings, I have them right on the transient, right on here, but I am attaching the swing to it. So if I were to justify this, oops, if I were to hit this button, the arrow, this is a committing button, so you commit the groove to the audio clip. If I were to do that, everything moves over just a little bit. So this is where the snare's actually hitting, rather than on here. So commit, it moves it over. Commit, moves it over. And just to show you how simple it can be to find vocals, this is our background vocal. So it's that, why does it feel so good? Why is it feel so good? And that's coming from this vocal.
If it's wrong, why does it feel so good? Why does it feel so good? Why does it feel so good?
Like, you don't have to use the vocals how they come. You can chop them up, put reverbs, delays all over them. This one was already wet, so I just left it mostly. So I just chopped it up. But this vocal is slightly relevant to the vocal we have in the breakdown, which I'll show you here.
Don't stop, let your body rock.
So don't stop, let your body rock. A little sexual. Feels so good. A little sexual. So they kind of make sense together. And if you listen to Control, the 2 vocals, the vocals are You Can't Control Me, and then the background is hypnosis, hypnosis as the response. So like control, hypnosis, they make sense together. Another small nuanced thing you have to be thinking about when you're putting these songs together. So the one thing different for the back half of this first 8 bars is that we have an automation on the kick drum, which just cuts the low end right here, rather than having all the sub content. So really simple intros. This vocal is filtered down, and it has an automation which starts in the second intro, which we can go over now. So it starts coming up in the second half here, second half of the first 4 bars. It kind of reaches its max destination. So what are we hearing that's new in this second half here? This dirty snare, which I probably should turn up a little bit because it needs to be a little louder. And that I had marked with this little green slot because they add just one other upbeat, offbeat, whatever you want to call it, item right here. That little like almost like dirty Skrillex like dubstep snare. So I tried to do something a little scratchy and have some distortion on it, and I went with that. It's fine. It's not a big deal right now. But the other thing is just having an impact, because now we're into like our first transition, and this, because the bass is in, this is where you would be exiting another song if you're DJing. And this is why these extended mixes are super important. Like DJs want this, like what they're doing right now with just the drums, first 8 bars, and then light bass in the second 8 bars, which we'll go over, and then having the sub come in the third. That's just how it goes now and what we need. So here, just a really simple bass line, which they are doing. It's just one loop throughout the entire track. It is just this. There is the same swing that we're using for the hi-hats on here. We're cutting the lows here at 255 hertz rather than, that's what it would sound like. It's just a simple preset. Like you could recreate this on your own. 3 oscillators, this pulse wave, a Juno, a triangle like sawtooth, filter, envelopes. This controls the cutoff. This controls a little bit of the coarse pitch. This is a preset from Deceiver Volume 4. I probably adjusted it a little bit, but that's what the effects look like. That's really it for this second intro part. What you need to be doing is just kind of previewing the bass without the sub, because you're not mixing out of the last song necessarily until this next part here. So quickly we'll run through this transition into the second intro, and then we'll go right into the third part of the intro / the warm-up, what I have here. And one more thing to note, I do have the edit info text here as well. So we're automating the vox, the background vocals a little more. And then we're just low cut / high passing the bass line and adding a crash or an impact. So you heard that extra snare come in right there. And this is as you're adjusting highs on the last track if you're DJing. Bass switch. Like I'm pumped already. This is how it happens. Okay, so back in action. So all we did here is just turn off this automation. And this is an automation thing we would use throughout the main drop, which I'll go over in the future video. But simply it's just adding back the sub bass, having the background vocals be at like full effect. And one thing I want to note quickly about these vocals before I move on is I have this plugin STFU, which is like a free kickstart, which you can shape the envelope. So it usually comes like this. If I go STFU, it usually comes looking like this. You can switch it to like that, and then this is kind of the envelope. So this is your kickstart basic thing, basic sidechain. You can sidechain to the kick or a trigger, or it'll just run off the metronome. And I have it just so it's kind of bouncing a little more the vocal. Then a simple auto pan to move it around a little bit. This lead specifically is just a poor recreation of this synth here. The basics of making one of those synths real quickly is having this arpeggiator. So I'll do it for the second one because it's just different on the other one. So this sounds like this. So all it is just adjusting this free rate. So it'll start, you'll load up your arpeggiator, it'll look like this with sync on. You just have to click this, go to free, and then adjust this. So set your automation however you like. There's a website, tempo to BPM, which you can go to. There's also a Max for Live device that will do the math for what BPM you're at, which is 130, and how many milliseconds are eighth notes, quarter notes, 16th dotted, etc. So there are websites to figure that out if you want like perfectly timed arpeggiators. For this one, we didn't really need that. I just kind of figured it out. This first one is, that's why I have these, because I couldn't figure it out and I didn't really want to. But then they also have a pitch bend, which I figured out was 7 semitones each way, but then I only started it like halfway up. So it's like a third. They're going from a fourth note or a like 4 semitones up and then coming down to the note, the root note that they want. But this, when you're DJing, you switch the sub bass, and like this is just so perfect for something to come in as the last track has no more synths anymore. And like I just can't say enough about just the simplicity and preciseness of this intro. So think about that when you're making your songs and your DJ intro specifically, because this sound is used in the third part of their drop. So we have 8 bars, and then here comes that sound again. So that's used as like a cool down effect later, but used as like a warm-up sound now. So just always keep trying to innovate, but keep it freaking simple, because simple works. You can actually just go down like a checklist and figure these things out. Like studying these tracks and trying to remake tracks has done wonders for me personally. Because the drums are so strong, they didn't need to add more elements. You don't need another top loop. You don't need a low perk loop. Like everything's just tight and in its own space, and they don't overdo anything. Like you just listen to that loop over and over. We are going to take what we learned and take what we keep learning and keep frickin' making house and making better drums and better intros and using our synths better and telling more stories with our vocals and calling and responding more. If you have any suggestions about what kind of artists we should cover in future videos or what kind of tracks you want me to break down, let me know in the comments there. A breakdown of the breakdown is coming up soon, but make sure to check out one of my other videos if you are so inclined. If you like what you see, make sure to hit subscribe. I'll see you soon.